Good morning. My name's Douglas Truth, and Words Fail Me is the name of this show. Now, I'm going to get right to the point because I got a very important show today. Very, very important, so I'm going to cut right to the chase. You know what that means, right? Cut to the chase. That means in a movie, it's like we want the mammalian thrill of the chase scene. So let's skip the dialogue and cut to the chase scene because that's what we want, right? All right, so those of you who have followed my work for a while know, or should know, that I have this propensity for writing things that happen. Now, no one knows whether it's precognition, whether I see things that are going to happen, or whether by the actual act of writing, a la William S. Burroughs' idea, you make things happen. You know, either way, it's kind of scary, and you have to watch what you say and do. So, back a few years ago, I got this idea based on a news item that I heard that PepsiCo had trademarked the phrase, they did that. And so I expanded on that idea that like what if they just owned language, you know? And it's not so fanciful an idea, right? I mean, language is a fantastically useful and productive and powerful thing that's not owned by anybody. You know, there are people that can't stand the idea of that. So something that's productive and powerful and useful that's publicly owned. No, we're going to privatize that shit, right? So, what's happening? I found out because I've done some research on this. It's that this whole nexus of corporate and government entities that are watching us, like Google and the NSA and CIA and the FBI, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You know, the whole thing is about terrorists, right? Well, it's not. You know, they know terrorism is usually, I mean, it's not like really a problem. Actually, it's something that they've created. They've created a problem in order to use it for other purposes. So Google reads every word in your email, right? Of course, if you don't know that, they listen to somebody's listening to every word of all your phone calls, even the phone calls you think about making, they're listening to all of it. Now they're listening to, I don't worry about this really. They're listening to me right now as I say this. But it's like I said, it's not to find terrorists. They're setting up this program. It's called the Total Information Awareness Program. That they're going to charge us for every word we say, even in private conversation. Even like muttering to yourself, you're going to be charged for that shit. So what this has done, now this is obviously not in the news yet, but what this has done is unleash a frenzy of lobbying. Special interest groups are all getting into the act, trying to get themselves, try to use this for their own purposes. So the Republicans and the corporatists, of course, are like gung-ho, like every word in the English language will be privately held, and you and I could be charged for the use of each word. You know, I mean, to them it makes perfect sense. Like the Nestle guy from a couple weeks ago, the head of Nestle Corporation said that like all fresh water ought to be privately owned so they could be carefully, properly taken care of. Sewage, of course, will be publicly owned. That's the way these things work. But, so these special interest groups have gotten together. There's churches, of course, they're in on the act, right? They want exemptions. They want exemptions for certain words that they like to use, so they aren't charged for them. Maybe it'll happen, maybe not. But what's even more scary about their interest groups is some of the fundamentalists are saying, like, certain words ought to be, like, really, really expensive. So every time you say a word like fuck, they want you to be charged, like, $18 for that. The Democrats, true to their nature, say $4, like something that's doable. And speaking of Democrats, they aren't really fighting this in principle. They're just saying, well, let's have some words that are free, like publicly owned, public option words, like 144, 72, 36. It doesn't, it depends on the level, but they aren't fighting very hard, frankly. And some are even saying, well, everything should be charged, but there should be like a subsidy for the income deprived, so that they can use, they can afford to get, use the words they need to get through the day, right? So there's that, and like speaking of fundamentalists, like a word like vagina, that would throw you in prison to use that word. It's so offensive to them that they can't even stand the idea that somebody would be able to say it legally. So there's going to be all kinds of repercussions here, and the scientists are the scientists are there lobbying, trying to get exemptions to stuff. But who listens to fucking scientists these days? They don't have any pull in Washington, so they're going to end up. It's really going to cramp scientific research because nobody will be able to afford to communicate. So I'm really frightened by this prospect, and I think it's. I mean, I would say that we ought to fight against it, but we know how effective that would be, right? It's not going to happen until the whole thing crashes. But I just thought you ought to know, and so maybe we could have a few parties and poetry slams and book readings, before it gets too expensive for us to do it. There's going to be. You can see the future in this. Like people, there'll be like expensive words because all the words aren't going to be the same price. Words like dirt and the and those will be cheaper words. What are they? When you get cable, it's like the economy package. There'll be certain words that are super expensive, and they aren't super expensive because of any intrinsic value. No, it's just that rich people want something to distinguish themselves from the fucking poor people, right? And so there'd be certain words that only rich fuckers can use because that's how they'll distinguish themselves. And people like David Brooks, writing for the New York Times, and people like that, they'll use fancy words, just to distinguish themselves from others. It's kind of horrifying, actually. But people. They'll go into debt or like a toast at the daughter's wedding, like there'll be fancy words and long drawn out toasts. Everybody's going, oh God, how can he afford to do this? Or drunken rants. I mean, that could land you in debtor's prison to go on a drunken rant and fuck this, blah, 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 blah. You wake up the next morning and you're like $50,000 in debt. Or you're in debtor's prison or something like that. Or you say illegal words. I'm not happy with this prospect. I'm not happy with this prospect, but I thought you ought to know. Now, as I thought about this, I started thinking about silver linings, right? Silver linings. That it's like pretty, but the thing is that one of the silver linings of this thing is that people would stop yakking all the time. They'd start appreciating the natural world around them instead of talking on the phone while they cross the street. I thought, hey, this could actually have some benefits. It's like there would, overnight, most blogs would disappear. All the comments would disappear. It'd just be too expensive to throw your 2 cents in, right? People wouldn't troll. They wouldn't verbally troll. It's like it would suddenly just be kind of quiet. You know what I mean? It would just... We'd actually maybe more in tune with the natural world and with the rhythms of our bodies and our friends and stuff. People would start to pay attention when they made dinner because you couldn't afford to watch TV. TV's too expensive. Meditation, people start meditating maybe. So I'm starting to see this could have unintended consequence because that's not the intended consequence for sure. But the unintended consequence could be interesting. Interesting, right? I just thought that I ought to tell you this before it became too expensive for me to say it. So, I mean, in certain ways it's bleak, the situation surrounding us, but it could force us all, in a way, to do our, in a phrase that some of you might find offensive, to do our spiritual work, to tend to our souls. And I say that with the utmost seriousness. So, again, I didn't know what that phrase meant when I came up with the words fail me. I had other ideas, but actually this is one of the main ways the words are going to fail me, is that I just simply won't be able to afford to use them. So I'm going to sign off now. I miss that dog so much. Brindle, where is she? Douglas Truth, words fail me. Take care. Bye.